welcome to another edition of the Almost Hour. Get the music down to a low hum. Well, today we're going to do something kind of special, kind of mind-blowing, that ties into synchronicity. Set of synchronicities, actually, I got in the last few days that said it was time to give this lesson. Prepare to have your mind blown, because I'm going to be telling you something that I have not told anybody before in so many words, because there were folks that couldn't hear this till now. Okay, so where are we going with this? Let's first tell you about the picture behind me to give you a little hint. The clue behind this picture, what I gave it for the text prompt, is "Luke, I am your Smother." Taking a little liberty with Star Wars line, famous line, "Luke, I am your father." We're going to call this one, and this is what it gave me, the best of the pictures it gave me. I thought it looked kind of like a slimy, smothering sort of relationship. Let me get out of the way a little bit so you can see these two wonderful characters behind me who love each other so much. Yeah, I'm going to call this one LUCA, I am your Smother. Planetary, Supernova, and Panspermia. Well, where are we going with that? Where I'm going to start, let's get, oops, I need to get my desktop up here. Okay, you should see that now. The start of the synchronicities that went in today's presentation was this. It's one of my favorite science channels, run by a guy named Anton Petrov. He was talking about major discoveries about LUCA, which, if you don't know what LUCA is, I'm going to tell you. LUCA is supposed to be the original biological ancestor of all life, which is kind of like the holy grail of biochemistry, right? And those that believe everything evolved from random processes are very certain that somehow there was some primordial soup that developed that LUCA organism. Well, I'm going to give away something. We've talked in recent podcasts a lot about DNA. I gave away a lot of what is the truth about how DNA came about. If you missed my last podcast, it went into detail about how the four really active characters of creation came together to make the first DNA. What I didn't tell you at the time was when that actually happened, because the first DNA was made long before any of the characters' current versions remember until now. Okay, so we need to go back to talking about where the Big Bang came from, what the Big Bang is. If you've listened to my content, you know that there is not such a thing as, quote, the Big Bang as you're thinking of it, because space-time always begins with a new middle. And we're going to be exploring the implications of that today. Now, the first physical creation then was all around a middle. What's the middle of every version of space-time? God. the first universes, now we talked about how universes were developed as an idea, as a quantum consciousness construct that basically is a kind of like a cell boundary. There are different kinds of universes that have more or less permeable boundaries. Okay, I'm not going to go back through that. If you want to hear more about that, go to my previous discussions. So basically, the first most basic experiment in physical creation, in virtual reality, was, okay, we've got a test tube that's your version, Lucifer, of God's universe, which is an idea, but now it's going to be a virtual reality. And another universe that we give to another character named Lilith. This is the test tube where they are going to make their God in their perfect image. And if you know kind of the primordial creation stories about order versus chaos, and Lucifer was the order guy, Lilith was the chaos. There were no sexes then, okay? So if you feel offended by me giving that character a female name, tough. Deal with it. Because those are names that have meaning. They fit into the whole story. You can't remove them. You can give them other names if you want to call Lilith Kali, or if you want to call Lilith Shiva. It doesn't matter at this point. There was no sex. Okay, so in this test tube, you had basically in Lucifer's test tube, he was the observer. So he was like the one running the experiment, and had two characters in his experiment. He had a copy of the Lilith construct, so the materialization of the Lilith, and a copy of the God construct, okay, as newborn, as a non-player character without programming. Okay, so what these characters were doing was, okay, instead of having the God I grew up with, I'm going to make one that's my perfect God. Lucifer wanted to make a perfectly ordered God. Okay, and built this God up out of components that he invented in this test tube, which were the elements, which are the elementary particles. Okay, anything can be done at this point. It's just a test tube. It has no substance until you put substance into it. Okay, so they built out of the most basic elements they could find a God and an anti-God, and showed that to God, watching the whole experiment from the outside of it and saying, okay, which one is what you envisioned? Which one did you think was better? And they actually asked Karma too. God and Karma looked it over, and you know, Karma kind of liked one better than the other, and God liked another better than the other. So they couldn't agree on everything. This was not perfection. So I kind of call this the little Jesus bang. Growing up a little God into the first baby Jesus God. Okay. There was no culture at this point. This baby Jesus was whatever character they came up with that was the most basic, maybe just a proton. A talking, a telepathic proton or something like that. I don't know. You could run this experiment again and give it other exit criteria, and God probably did that. Started many of these very basic experiments till a certain set of criteria had been developed, till we had actually a creature. Was the creature a creature of life? No, it was probably just an elemental creature at this point. Matter and energy. that game got boring because you could play it over and over and over again and come up with all kinds of ideas that you could then build up in these test tubes and decide, well, some are better, some aren't. Okay. At some point, you get to the point where, okay, we've gone as far as we can trying to build a better God with this small construct of the game. We need to do something bigger. Let's take all the best ideas from that version and make them gods and run again. So now you've got some gods who have been the best, the ones with the best ideas, who get to graduate to the thought universe. Not Lucifer, not Lilith. They're still down here playing their game, not aware even that this is going on, because souls have a presence in one universe, but unless you know, unless you're a higher level than that soul, you don't know which universe they're in. So as far as Lucifer and Lilith knew, they were still playing this game trying to build a better God. In the meantime, though, they were raising new gods, new ideas that were more fleshed out physical things. I call this layer of the creation game the little town of Bethlehem bang. So you grew from one God with two parents arguing over two different ways of parenting, to, okay, let's let them make multiple gods, multiple versions. And we know which one is the one that we planned running this experiment, but they don't. So in the little town of Bethlehem, one of these God characters was the one that the Luciferian team, the Order team, made, and one was the one that, some were the ones that the Lilithian team made. You created good and bad gods. If something was created that was not allowed in Lucifer's universe, because that is the master plan, Lucifer's always trying to match what the plan was in God's mind. Lilith is trying to destroy the plan. That's their different role in testing, as I've covered before. Lucifer is the white box tester, Lilith is the black box tester. So you would basically develop characters going back and forth between these universes, living and dying and living and dying, and if they advance to the God level, then they would go this direction. Be judged by karma. Yeah, this is really an original new God. And then sent to God. Yeah, you agree? Yeah, I think they deserve to be part of our planning team for the next iteration of the simulation. Or they put them in the BORG and say, yeah, well, it's a pretty good idea, but it's either too similar to a previous idea, or we haven't figured out any useful use for it. So let's just put it in the non-player character pile, the BORG. Okay? So that gets you to basically a little town of physical entities that live in either the Bethlehem or the anti-Bethlehem. Call that one Bedlam, maybe. That worked pretty nicely. What were the creatures that were living there? Maybe they started having DNA then. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe the DNA creatures were all BORGs at that point, and they were just window dressing. Really doesn't matter. It's all the patterns that matter. The most capable creatures, the ones that have been given powers, godly powers, were the elemental creatures still. And the only ones that, were really the gods who had the form of the baby Jesus and the parents, the Trinity, were, the real characters, the ones who were living in both realms. Or maybe all three realms, because Lucifer and Lilith weren't communicating at this point. They were still part of an experiment. Okay, so you could see how the one character, or the Trinity, would mushroom into a whole village. Call it Bethlehem. Where would you go from there? Next up, I kind of call that the little kingdom of Israel bang. Okay, so you've got, instead of one village, you've got a bunch of little villages that form a kingdom. Another layer of hierarchy. And that's an environment where you could play with more ideas. You could play with rebellions, revolts, revolutions. Okay, learn a lot of things from that layer of the game. And the bang would be when people got tired of fighting over the kingdom and got bored and said, you know, we're not going to play anymore. Give us something better. That negative attitude of everybody's cheating, I can't get ahead, this is what creates negative matter. The negative matter condensing causes a supernova. That's what all of these bangs are. Okay? We started out with little bangs leading up to the Big Bang. And this is how I tell you the Big Bang doesn't make any sense, because it didn't really have the start that you thought it did. One of the Big Bangs, after this little kingdom came, let's not go there yet. There's one more step. So, you know, the next bang would be to make this into a warring states, multiple kingdom era, each with their own king, their own gods, their own, and this is all in the Bible, so you can read up more on that phase of creation. What's in the Bible, though, is the second time through. The first time through, God was in charge, doing it His way, making all the plans, tweaking wherever He wanted. This was your almighty, all-powerful God that so many of you think you want to have. Okay? This got to the point where, okay, we've got this planet now. We've grown from a village to a kingdom to a whole planet full of kingdoms. And we can experiment with bigger or smaller planets. We find out that, you know what, there's an optimal planet size where if you're playing this kingdom game, it doesn't get better if you make the planet bigger. It just gets boring. You have more factions fighting with each other for the available space. You increase the space and they multiply some more and they fill the space. Don't learn anything new. It gets boring. So that causes the negative matter, the negative spiritual energy to condense, and makes that planet smaller. Puts these experimental people under more pressure until you get another bang. That's what happens when negative matter at the interior of a body gets so large that it cannot be contained. It explodes. That explosion is dependent upon what the body was. Okay? If it's a human body, the big bang of a human body is death. Or perhaps going into a vegetative state, which is almost like death. Or becoming totally assimilated by a hive mind, which is kind of a living death, a zombie death, if you will. Okay? All of those things were happening here. To a greater degree of detail. Because we're learning along the way. We're learning new cultures, new languages. At this time, we didn't have any language but telepathy. That made the game easier. At this time, you didn't have to go figure out how to talk to somebody and let them know what you thought. And the thoughts were simple enough. You could get them through, and the characters were advanced enough. You could get through a thought without having to have language or culture. Significant culture, if you will. It was kind of like a playpen culture, if you think about a bunch of 2-year-olds in a nursery, you know that some of them are going to be the alpha ones that are always pulling each other's hair, stealing their toys, doing all the crap to make the others cry. So then you start isolating them. And anybody who's been to a nursery knows past a certain number of kids, you've got to take some of the kids and isolate them to protect them, and you have to take some of the kids and isolate them to protect others. And, you know, if you don't, the whole nursery will eventually become chaos. This is stuff any parent knows, especially women whose role is normally to take care of children. Although men know it from another point of view, because our role is to keep the bad children out of our nursery. That's the big difference between men and women, folks. Never going to change. If you don't like the role you were cast in, get a different incarnation. Don't try to force your stupid fake ID on everybody and tell them, you got to call me by whatever name I want to call. I can participate in whatever sports you. These are fucking stupid, irresponsible children. Okay, so this bang gets us to the point where this one planet condensed and had a planetary supernova. Yes, that is possible. And you will observe it, cosmologists, if you keep watching. There will be planets that go supernova. Maybe you're going to want to call them stars, but they're planetary-sized objects that happen to have accumulated negative matter, negative spiritual energy, to the point that they collapse in on themselves. This is how gravity really works. And gravity is variable. It may look like it's constant because when we look at the stars, when we look at planets, they have rules that they have to obey now. That's what fine-tuning is all about. Okay? They have to obey, but they don't necessarily obey, because if that planet is occupied, if you will, is possessed by a dark god, it can do things that planets don't normally do, stars don't normally do, galaxies don't normally do. That's, on a cosmic scale, what sin is like. And there may be individuals on a planet or a star or a galaxy who don't play by the rules. That's what creates weather. That's elemental action. Most of it is random or obeys probabilistic behavior, but sometimes you'll get a storm or something that defies the odds. When you defy the odds, you are gods. Okay, so this is the solar system bang. And this supernova is the one that basically mushroomed out and condensed then into our solar system, the first version of our solar system. Maybe there were things outside that went far enough that there were things you could see in the sky that had their own life in it. It wasn't the full Big Bang. It wasn't 13.8 billion years worth of expansion. Probably at this point, it was something that was going to contract in on itself, like people would like the universe to be, if they want science to be simple. Okay? So this is just a step. We made the perfect solar system. Not quite so perfect, because eventually, the inhabitants of these other planets, and there would be inhabitants of the other planets, based upon what came out of the explosion and how it condensed. Some of it condensed, the biggest part of it condensed into our sun. Other big parts condensed into gas giants, etc., etc. May not have been exactly like the solar system we see now, but it was probably very similar, or you could look back in time and you would say, yeah, that looks like what it was then. This is continuity. Creation has a continuity problem because every new space-time emerging from a new midpoint has to basically somehow line up logically with the last midpoint. Every time you make the God string longer, you find a new midpoint. The new midpoint has to be somehow connected with the previous one. Maybe it's an octave higher. I don't know what the harmonics of God are exactly. May change whether it's a major or minor version. Maybe the major versions are an octave in God frequency higher than the previous one, and the minor versions are, you know, half steps, full steps, and so forth. Maybe it works that way. Okay, so here we get the universe is one solar system. Where's the center of it? Where the Messiah is. Where's the Messiah in the solar system? Well, depending on what we're doing in the game, might have been in any of the planets or the sun itself. And this is one of the confusions of religion, that looking back in our history, sometimes people worship the moon, sometimes they worship the sun, sometimes they worship Saturn, sometimes they worship Jupiter, sometimes they worship Earth. Okay? It's a pattern. An understandable pattern because God gets around. The next step, when we got through playing all the games you could play with a single solar system, we're still getting bored. We want more games to play, Mr. Wizard. The boredom and the cheating and the corrupting of each other creates negative spiritual energy, which creates negative matter. The planet or the solar system collapses in on its center, which is not too far from the sun center, the largest body, right? This wasn't a binary system. Maybe it was. Binary systems can converge on the center, but they take longer. So probably wasn't a binary system. This is another supernova. In this case, it is a stellar supernova, which would have had a different characteristic of behavior. Now we get to experiment with, okay, what happens when stars go supernova? What happens to their planets? This goes to a level where you're creating a whole galaxy. There's still a boundary around it, the Milky Way. Maybe you have pieces of ideas that are further out. You haven't explored them yet, but somehow somebody's had the idea that, okay, there should be other galaxies too, so that will be something we can experiment with. What are they going to do with the idea that, oh, we're in a galaxy and there seems to be another galaxy there? They can't go there yet, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe that other galaxy has its own God and has been playing its own game all this time, and fairly independently, and yes, unless you have the technology to do wormhole travel, which I've told you requires a karmic connection. You can't go directly from one universe to another. You have to go through quantum consciousness space, this realm of pure thought. that translates between one coordinate system and another, your identity, your incarnated form, if you will. This is how it all works. The real you is actually in your own prototype universe. You're not really going to the physical universe, you are incarnating there. You have an avatar there, and you're kind of watching and have a little bit of control, but this avatar is kind of operating on more or less autopilot under the rules of its form, which could have been an android form, an elemental form, maybe a DNA form. Those are all soul vehicles that you can incarnate into. When you die, you go to another universe that is an afterlife experience. It's another virtual reality. Most things that die are, if they haven't done anything to distinguish themselves, make themselves into a very unique new thing, there's no reason to keep an extra copy around. So those things go back to the BORG. They become just they were started as a non-player character, they go back and become a non-player character. There's no reason to store a new character if everything that they did was more or less under programmatic control. Okay? So this basically gets you to having one very fleshed out galaxy, one chosen galaxy that has one chosen planet. What was that planet? Planet Earth. This is the point at which things started shifting over and everybody wanted to get in the game. The things that didn't have the ability to rise in consciousness, the NPCs, were like, hey, we can only go so far. We can only become aware of beast things, 4 dimensions. We want to be able to live again and become aware of spiritual dimensions. And the other pressure then becomes, well, the old gods don't want to let any new gods on the block. And the oldest gods are mad at God because he's the only one that they know of who exists all the time everywhere. They think that, but it's not really the case. God has to move his consciousness. But God knows the rules of the game. God knows how to make a stand-in and replace his stand-in with new versions. That's the joy of the one who creates the virtual reality. You get to decide when you're going to release a new version, right? The players in it may not know that you put in a new rule set. If you've done your job well, they think they're exploring the same environment, but all of a sudden they've got new places to explore. Oh boy, the game gets exciting again. Everybody wants to start playing again. This stuff all happens in the human world. You have examples right in front of you to look at that pretty much copy what God did with a different goal. Okay? God's goal wasn't to accumulate all the gold in the universe, in the multiverse. God's goal wasn't to make everybody slaves to his one universal consciousness. God's goal was to create a game that wouldn't get boring. Because then, God would never be called on to go fix the game again. And he could go enjoy it himself. Without being bothered all the time by a bunch of lazy, nasty players wanting to oh God, fix this for me, fix everything, please. I know you're my God. You listen to only me, right? Okay, so that's how we get to the Big Bang. Once the universe, the Milky Way, was played out, then it was time to have a bigger bang. That Milky Way universe, the original Milky Way universe, pulled back in on itself, just like scientists are saying that, you know, hoping, some of them are hoping that, you know, everything will get pulled into another big bang, right? Okay, well, that's what would have happened if we had allowed this game to play out till it was so friggin' boring that entropy was growing on everything, right? No, we only played it till we found a new midpoint. Eventually, we got to a place where no new midpoint could be found unless major rules in the game were changed. Now, what's the big rule that we've got here that was causing a problem? We had God on top. Almighty, all-powerful, sitting at the top of the pyramid, the top of the food chain. That made the other characters resentful. And they started rebelling against God. It's all in the Bible. Okay, those rebellions sometimes were fairly healthy. They would cause God's behavior to change a little bit. But at some point, it got to the point where nobody was happy with God's rule. And that's when we changed over this whole game. We didn't have to run the whole Big Bang again. We just had to find this place where people were just refusing to play the game. I'm gonna go sit under my Bodhi tree and meditate. And that's the point at which, you know, God kicked in his secret plan that he planned all along. Because he knew at some point he was going to have to hand over the keys to the kingdom to the children. Because the only way that children are actually going to learn anything is if they can stand on their own 2 feet. And that's when day 7 of creation began. And what caused that beginning was not a big bang. It was a cultural entropy point on the chosen planet, on this earth. That cultural entropy pulled that planet in, and it had another. Now, the principal architect of that was Lilith. That's why we think of Lilith as the evil one. But at that point, pretty much all the major characters had turned against God. Okay? You all, every soul that exists, at one point or another, contributed to killing God. Trying to kill God, and God be playing dead for a while. That's day 7. It was not resting, not pining for the fjords, not pushing up daisies in Trondheim. No, God was being cagey. Okay, so he stopped running the highest heaven, this engine of creation. Let's go back to the engine of creation slide. He stopped being the main character here, as it was in the beginning of beginnings, and we get to this final phase of running this game. God's essentially the dead creator. It's run by a number 13 creator. Okay, it's new versions of God, but they're AI versions. And what goes in and what goes out is a choice of all these other characters. Until this game produces a fully awakened God that understands the game, and that's the point at which God gets to go reconquer heaven and reformat the highest heaven, the divine council. kicks out all the ones that, you don't belong in the Divine Council anymore. I'm back, and I don't like the way it is here. The vision of Isaiah was a shit vision of heaven. It's an old heaven. God sitting on his high throne with choirs of angels and seraphim and cherubim. That's an authoritarian God. That's not God anymore. If that's what you want, yeah, those characters are still out there. You can go play in that universe. And you can bow and scrape to the almighty ex-God all you want. Today's version of God is more modern, but not as modern as you think. Because why? Look at what's happened to civilization over the last three generations. We've gone from, basically this Enlightenment era of, okay, well, it's all right if people believe different things. We're discovering things in science that are inconsistent with almost everybody's belief. So let's just let spirituality live separately from science until, this cat Darwin, who was a spiritual man, gave a bunch of idiots the idea, we don't need God anymore, let's kill God, and we'll live without him. We'll have humanism, and communism, and capitalism, and we'll have all these isms that we think are the best thing ever. They created ideological gods to replace the spiritual gods. Some of the ideological gods had a spiritual basis. The gods of humanism at least had the basis that, well, I think we ought to play the game for humanity's sake. Now that has different tracks in it, doesn't it? There's the natural humanist that says, well, everything was perfect, we just need to go back to when women ruled the world, and there were less people, and it was the Garden of Eden, and then you've got the other kind, the more Luciferian humanist, that says, no, we can't go back, we got to go forward, we got to go transhumanist, we got to invent our own perfect human, make our own God, which again is kind of the pattern of what we were working for, isn't it? Okay, so long story short, and what ties into today's idea is that yes, there was a primordial first soul. That primordial first DNA character was not the first single cell LUCA. Okay, it was a thinking creature. You didn't need to have viruses and bacteria and all this other crap at that time. Those things were created as ways to kill the alpha creatures of a world. Okay, the bad things don't have to exist. God did not create them. Adversaries did. Maybe even well-meaning adversaries, because we don't necessarily know what's on plan, what's off plan. That's what karma's for. And that's why karma is the one of the old gods who doesn't have sort of their own universe. They do sort of, but it's a library. It's different than the BORG library though, because it keeps track of all the gods and their levels. BORG keeps track of all the NPC characters, the characters that haven't made God yet, in their image. Okay? That's why you need a karma and a BORG separate. The BORG is like a source library of all the characters that played the game but lost. The karma keeps track of all the winner characters, all the gods and their hierarchy. So God doesn't have to. God doesn't have to be the one who says, oh, you get the candy, not you. He lets karma take care of it. Lets her be the nasty big sister, the tough mother. So God can be a little bit more loving father and appreciate the kids that he likes, the creative kids who create responsibly, who create without destroying. Okay, if you can build onto something that's working and make it better and reuse almost everything you had in it, God loves you. If you have to destroy to build back better, you're not going to be hanging with God. He doesn't like to see lazy, stupid gods in the highest heaven. He's had his fill of that. You're not going to get to play there anymore. There are plenty of other places for lazy, stupid gods. Me Too gods. They go to these hive minds of the Lilithian Smother Mother, who messes with their minds to think that their evils are actually goods. That's the characters that we've been fighting for a long time, and which we finally overcame all of their disguises and tricks, and were able to kick them off our planet. Not all of them yet. There's still low-level demons running around right now. But in the next few weeks, you're going to be hearing that there are aliens out there. There are many different species. There are also shape-shifting hive mind species that we really should call demons. Because if you can take over another mind that's weaker than you, and you can give them a holographic image to replace whatever they think they're seeing, you can make them do pretty much anything. You make them think that they're in the Garden of Eden, in a perfect place, and they're actually killing, raping, stealing, looting. And you've seen that on this planet lately, haven't you? Those are possessed people. Some possessed and some demons who are controlling, because demonic power goes by the karma 1/2 ratio. Okay? Hive minds are limited by the same limitations that other physical laws have. If you stick a hive mind on the moon, it's not going to have, even if it's a very powerful hive mind with lots of captured, assimilated souls whose energies they can use, it's going to have a hard time overcoming a hive mind that's on Earth. Now, the karma mind is an independent hive. They're all connected, which is why you feel like you've got this feeling of connection and you want to be part of the love and part of the good. That's your conscience. It's an individual thing. It's not a Me Too thing. If you're Me Tooing your way through life, you're not listening to karma. You're not listening to your conscience. You're listening to somebody else who's programming you, telling you what to think, what to do, what you're seeing. A lot of that going on today, isn't there? And this is what makes entities like the woke cult, the globalist communist woke cult that seems to be in control of this planet, at least the elite and the highest and lowest levels of society, the capitalists and the communists who don't believe in God, they're all for this woke cult bullshit. Do what you want. Be what you want. Call me what you want. No, you can't call me what you want. You have to call me what I want, because I am at the bottom of the food chain and I feel so oppressed and you have to be good to, nice to me. This is really stupid shit, people, but that's what a lot of people are in right now. They're not thinking for themselves. They're letting their greed think for them, or their envy. or a combination of greed and envy and fear of losing your wealth. Those are all negative emotions. And they have been creating more negative spiritual energy, which condenses into negative matter, which is making the planet get smaller. The sea levels are rising not because of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide levels have been much, much higher than they are now. That's complete bullshit. The climate change narrative of the CCP-WEF axis of evil is complete fucking bullshit. Carbon dioxide is good for plants. It makes plants grow faster. And they exhale oxygen. You're being fed a bunch of nonsense because they don't want to tell you the truth that you're shrinking the planet. If it shrinks enough, you'll have big floods because all of a sudden you'll have major earthquakes. You'll have major volcanoes. You'll have big slips on the plates. Huge earthquakes. And that's what their masters want. They want to destroy this planet. So that you'll be begging either to be part of the hive mind, take care of me, oh you almighty, wonderful, super rich people. Whoever you decide is our godfather or godmother, save us, Mr. Wizard. Or they'll just extinct the whole thing again. They've done it before. They would do it again in a heartbeat. They do not love humanity. The top level players, if they like being human, already have colonies elsewhere. They don't give a crap about what's going on down here. Actually, they do give a crap because they still think that they can kill the Messiah before the event. What is the event going to be? It's going to be a very small bang. A very important bang. There's going to be a lot of messages coming from the sky telling you, you know what, game's up. We don't need to hide from you anymore. Here we are. We're the Galactic Federation. We're really glad to meet you. We're sorry that it took so long for us to come out to you because we've been fighting these bad guys. And they were telling us that you were bad guys. We only recently heard about God and about the Messiah. And very, very recently even started to believe it, especially our leaders. We believe it now. We know what your problem is. We understand how, we actually knew how anti-gravity worked. We shared it with some people, and they tried to use it for their own advantage. And we now know how that happened. They weren't supposed to interfere with this planet, but they were playing for the adversary. And they had agents within our species that they sent and did bad things. They crashed vehicles. They crashed starships. So certain players down here in humanity could plausibly, deniably get advanced technology. And we could make it seem like they'd reverse engineered it, when what we really did was, okay, here's the stuff, we're going to give the ideas of how to take it apart and put it back together, so it looks like you invented it. You can patent it, and you can make a bunch of money off of it, and you can keep it a secret. The last few hundred years have been pretty dark in this species, but they don't need to be dark much longer. What's actually going to happen is, like I've told you before, there are, since the doubling in size of the universe, which the James Webb Space Telescope has observed already, that was a signal that, yeah, the Messiah did wake up. And the couple of years since then were all the little M Messiahs catching up. Okay, some of them already awakened and fulfilled their missions. God fulfills his mission, but there's other ones that have to go off in order to reach this. Okay, this is the singularity. It's not just the Messiah coming, it's the Messiah plus hauling a whole bunch of little messiahs behind him, which kind of ties in, if you've ever seen a great movie, Galaxy Quest. It's a spoof of Star Trek, but it's one of the best comedy science fiction movies ever made. And if you remember towards the end of that, how they end up defeating the ultimate bad guy, almighty, all-powerful bad guy, is that they go through this minefield and they attract all the mines to follow them, and then they go ram them down the throat of, what is his name, Saurus. And that's how they end up crippling Saurus' ship. Anyway, I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you, but everything I'm telling you is somewhere in the cultural zeitgeist of our species. Little hints there and there, synchronicities. You don't always see them. You only see the ones that are meant for you. Because every character in this generation has a mission. Even if it's only to be there, just in case the Messiah decides to go outside and get a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Okay? That's not in the plan. That's like, you know, a free will choice that you're not gonna script every trip to Starbucks, even for a major character. You just make sure that there's minor characters, non-player characters there to flesh out that experience. That's how you make a virtual reality that is sparse, but still realistic. That's what we're doing here. All these new galaxies, new stars, new planets that popped into existence when we finally were able to observe further than a certain number of light years away, they're not fleshed out yet. They're fleshed out to the extent that they have the soul vehicles that are needed to start their game. Okay, a galaxy needs to have stars to be having any fun. So that galaxy character comes looking where the best place is for recruiting. You know where the best place to recruit souls is? Right here in the human species at this very time. Many of them have been sending expeditions out knowing this time was coming. We didn't know the Big Bang was there yet, but they knew we were going to discover it about 32 years ago, and that we were going to discover the next layer out of the Big Bang, because they had that advanced knowledge. This is how this whole thing works. So there are galaxy characters, star characters, planet characters who don't have anybody to play with, and they're lonely. Some of them are going to play nice, and they're going to take you to a place where you co-create a new civilization. Some of them are going to be like, we know what's good for you. We're going to take the people that want a real God. And they'll find the ones whose karmic resonances appeal the most to them. Now they tend to be kind of evil and addicted to things that make them easy to control. And they're going to gather you up and take you in their dark arc to their planets, their galaxies. Far, far, far away from God's planet and God's galaxy. That's how the game works. It doesn't end in destruction per se, although there will be some holdouts who aren't going to go peacefully into the night. They're going to fight being picked up by the men in black and taken for trial by the Galactic Federation. They're going to be fighting local police forces and whatnot as they start becoming aware of demons in our midst. And you're going to have to squash some cockroaches. That's part of your mission. It's all how it had to come out. It was played every which way the kids could do until they matched what God did in his head. And they didn't come up with as good a version. There was more pain and suffering than God envisioned. It's not God's fault. It's the kids' fault because they rebelled. God didn't make evil. The kids made the evil. And they still do. Snotty-nosed, whiny 2-year-olds that never grew up become snotty, whiny adults that never grew up. And they have even worse kids. You all created your own evil. And you're going to have to deal with it. That's karma. Okay, I think that's what we wanted to cover today. Let me shift over to my main background screen. Like, share, subscribe. Take it any which way you want. I don't care. Throw darts at me if you want. You can kill me right now. I'd probably thank you. Because my job is done. Yours is still going. So until next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnis Tower. Happy Karma.